How do?
How do? How best.
Right, where are you from? Are we going to need subtitles?
Yeah. So I'm Roddy Russell, originally from the Forest of Dean, now living in Staffordshire.
Duck. How do duck?
Ducks down
How
there,
do
yeah.
duck?
All right, ducky.
Where's Forest of Dean?
Forest of Dean is in Gloucestershire on the border of Wales.
Is it posh?
No, far from it. They might have a few posh people in there. No.
Right, obviously some of you might notice me and Roddy are in a new studio. It's not actually a new studio, it's our lass's car. Roddy's brother is another IPP prisoner. Different story to the other guys, very complicated. We're going to go very slow. Hopefully you'll learn some things. We've had a decent chat. I've learned some things. Hopefully you've learned some stuff from my point of view.
Yeah, I've picked up on,
that'll help you understand just how corrupt the system is. Perhaps would be a good word for it.
Yeah, I like to say broken and toxic.
Broken and toxic's fine. We're going to burst an urban myth straight off before we start. Your brother, let me finish before you answer. Your brother obviously had an extensive criminal history. He was very dangerous, lots of prison sentences, and upon arriving at Crown Court, the judge decided because of this extensive history, he was going to give him an IPP. He initially got a 3-year IPP, which was then reduced to 2.5 years. Is that correct?
The tariff is correct.
The tariff's correct.
The past history about his criminal history is not, because he doesn't have any past criminal history.
First time offender, 2.5 year IPP. There you go, that has blown some people straight out of the water. Do you want to talk a little bit about his index offence? Perhaps first a good place to start, Roddy, would be to talk about his mental health.
Yeah, so on the run up to his offence, he was from about the age of 14, he had started drinking alcohol, smoking cannabis and taking LSD. He got married, and the person he got married to was against drugs, so he gave up the drugs, continued drinking, and became alcohol dependent, which effectively ended his marriage and his job. Got in tow with another person who was also a heavy drinker, and he ended up threatening to burn somebody by way of sending either a text message or a voicemail message down the phone, and turned up at the property behaving in a manner where he might have actually carried out burning the person. And then he was subsequently arrested and charged and prosecuted.
Was he arrested at the scene?
He was arrested at the scene, yeah. He was sat on his haunches, the police turned up, and yeah, when they arrested him, Crown Prosecution Service decided to prosecute him. He went to Magistrates Court and then Crown Court, and he was handed the IPP sentence with originally with the 3-year tariff, and then reduced to 2.5 years on appeal. So he went to Gloucester Crown Court first, and then the appeal was heard at Cardiff Crown Court.
Did you try and appeal the IPP?
I'm not sure whether he appealed the IPP or not.
Or just the tariff?
No, as far as I know, they just appealed the sentence. So when the sentence is an IPP sentence, so to my mind, then yes, it was appealed.
Did he plead guilty in court?
He was advised by his defence to plead guilty. He did plead guilty, and he also, part of his pleading guilty was to accept responsibility for his wrongdoing that he committed.
Okay. Was his mental health assessed as part of his sentencing court procedure? You know what I'm saying? If he had a recognised mental health history, then usually that would be taken into consideration
So he'd been under mental health care prior to his arrest, and when he was put before the magistrates court, certain professionals within prosecution turned round and told the magistrates that he had no mental health history, but yet he's got mental health history that goes right back to not long after he was born, actually.
Has he ever been sectioned prior to being sentenced? Has he, been in a forensic unit?
He's not been sectioned. He's been in and out of mental health hospital.
Yeah.
Through
referral.
Self-referral, yeah. But he's never been sectioned by the police.
Did you challenge the fact that they said there was no mental health history?
I didn't know.
Were you not aware of that?
I wasn't aware until sometime into his sentence what had actually gone on. So so he'd been arrested. He'd started his sentence, and when he was handed the sentence, I thought, okay, 2.5 years. You've been you've committed your wrongdoing. Go into prison, do whatever it is you got to do your time, and get out, and don't do something so stupid again.
Again, you had no understanding of what an IPP was.
I never knew what an IPP was until he was coming up to the end of his tariff, and then once he'd passed his tariff, I started to realise that things weren't quite right. Especially after he tried his first attempt at suicide whilst he was in prison.
Just for people who might be watching this, don't know what an IPP is, haven't watched any of the other interviews. Indeterminate public protection, basically, it's saying people can be locked up till they're no longer a risk to the public. Everyone who comes out of prison is a risk. It was initially designed for offenders, serial criminal offences that are not going to get a life sentence. So serious sex offenders, terrorism and the likes of that. I am going to distinguish now between the sort of IPP prisoners we're talking about, lads and lasses who were given 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, who are still in 13?
Yeah, he's coming up, it'll be 14 years in August.
Coming up to 14 years now, and it's his first offence, as opposed to them that are on IPPs for serious offences. The issues around these lads and lasses, like I said, who are way over tariff. Right, so you said then about how long into it was it before he tried to take his own life?
So it would have been shortly after his tariff had expired. He'd been engaging with the prison service, doing everything that they'd been requesting of him, and then he must have hit a low point and just became totally withdrawn, got himself into a catatonic state, basically.
Do you think? I think that people like your brother, they see a 3-year tariff, they think when they get to 3 years, despite what people are telling them, that they're going to be getting out of prison. When the realisation sinks in that it's not happening, perhaps that is their lowest once they get past the tariff, because that seems to be quite a popular.
Yeah, I'd say that's a trigger point for many of the IPPs when they get to that. If they've not understood what the sentence is prior to reaching their tariff, once they reach tariff and they're not getting out, I think that's when the reality starts to sink in, and I think that they're never ever going to get out.
Again, for people who might not understand what a tariff is, that is the length of time you're going to serve on a normal sentence. 2-year tariff, you might do 12 months and 12 months on licence. Having a tariff on an IPP sentence seems to, well, there's not that many people get out, is there?
Well, I've not experienced what it's like to be for an IPP to be released with regards to my brother, because he's never been released. But what I do know is that if the parole board do decide to release him, then he's on licence. And in the early days of the IPP, before they made the changes because of it being so inhumane, you were on licence for 99 years, so you're on licence for the rest of your life. then they realised in their wisdom, hindsight wisdom, that this was unsustainable. So they, I think your licence, you go out on licence for 10 years, and then the licence can be removed after 10 years.
You have to apply for it to be removed.
At the moment you do, yeah. I believe that's going through a bit of a change where they will contact the IPP prisoners to say that it's being removed, or that they're...
well, the licence should be appropriate to the tariff. So if someone got a 3-year tariff, they would have no licence. How it works is, if you get 3 years, serve 18 months on licence. If you breach during that time, then you go back in and you can serve your 3 years. But after 3 years, that's it. There's no licence to serve. You're released. There's no terms and conditions. What they will need in place, I don't think they should necessarily come out on a licence, all these people over tariff. I would call it a care plan. I would think that everyone comes out is going to need a lot of help.
I would say so now, with how disastrous and irredeemably flawed this sentence is. Don't say that lightly. I've got the backup of the Justice Select Committee to say that it's irredeemably flawed. So these people have been in these locked up in these cells and institutionalized. They've lost many of their life skills, and they are undoubtedly going to need some level of support. Some will need more support than others upon release, because they are that as a direct result of this sentence, these people are mentally damaged. They have been damaged by this sentence, and this sentence has to be ended. And at the moment, it's only the Justice Select Committee, the Justice Secretary, that has the authority to end this sentence. But there's no consistency with the Justice Secretaries. They come and they go. And at the moment, that rests with Dominic Raab. And look at the mess that Dominic Raab's in at the moment. So can't really see him perhaps ending the IPP sentence as we stand at this moment in time.
I don't think he'll end it, because he's not going to want to put pen to paper. Exactly.
He'll probably be gone anyway. And then there'll be another Justice Secretary. But if they go with the Justice Select Committee's recommendations and set up, mandate a panel of people to sort it out, and leave that panel of people to sort it out, then there's your solution. But these ministers just will not listen to all of these experts and professionals who are advising them what they need to do. The ministers just won't do it. They want to use it as a political a way of getting votes through what they'll cry is "let's get tough on crime." But I think the public have generally had enough of this "get tough on crime," because all they're doing is extending sentences and is having no result whatsoever on reducing crime. Need to take the Scandinavian model.
Can I give you a civilian, or I was a prison officer, but I'm no longer a civilian point of view now looking at it? You know, I do look what's going on. People right now are committing serious offences, assaults on police officers, sexual offences against kids, and getting suspended sentences. They're not getting sent to prison. Yeah, prisons are full, the courts are backlogged. They realise this, and it seems that their solution is not to send people to prison. They're people who are committing serious offences. So with what's happening now, I think it's quite sickening. There was a police officer who was assaulted quite recently. There was a picture of her with a shaved head. There was a significant wound that had been stapled on her skull where she'd been assaulted with a weapon. And it showed you a picture of the lad walking out of court with a suspended sentence. So he's assaulted a police officer with a weapon, you know, caused significant damage, and he's smiling walking out of court, having not gone to prison. So, tough on crime, my arse. They don't seem concerned about getting people out of prison that are in prison. Right now, 45, 50 grand a year to keep someone inside. Yeah?
Yeah.
We're continually sending addicts, people with alcohol addictions to prison, 3 months at a time, 6 months at a time. That's 25 grand to put someone in. Surely that 25 grand can be better spent doing something with these people. You know, prisons are full again. They're building more prisons. They're not building enough spaces for the estimated growth of the prison population by 2026. So for me, that says it all.
Well, they're building more prisons, but they haven't got the staff to staff the prisons, and they're not going to get the staff to staff the prisons because they don't train the staff properly. They don't pay the staff properly, and so therefore they won't retain the staff. And anyway, the building prisons for more prisoners because they're issuing longer sentences is a model that's been proven time and time again not to work, whereas the Scandinavian model does work. Rehabilitation is the answer, but well, the ministers don't want to see that, and the public aren't really interested until it affects them. But once it does affect the public and they see how government are spending their money within the so-called justice system, they would be outraged, and that money could be better spent on other services. And the Scandinavian model, although in the short term it's more expensive, in the longer term it's so much cheaper.
Reoffending rates,
yeah,
addiction.
You've got a Prime Minister that wants people to go back to do maths. I think that Prime Minister needs to go back and do his maths. In fact, it's not maths, it's just basic arithmetic. Oh, I'm starting to rant now.
Listen, this is why we're here. We're here to unload, Roddy. Yeah, I mean what you've just said. In you know, short version, how's the Scandinavian system work? Let's educate people. I know about it.
So a person commits an act of wrongdoing. They are, for want of a better word, they're sentenced. They're given a sentence, but they're then given a rehabilitation program to understand what it is that they've done wrong, so that they don't do wrong again. And this rehabilitation program that they're put on, it works. The
proven track record.
They don't reoffend.
Yeah, addiction rates are down.
Or very few reoffend. There's a small minority of them that do reoffend, but generally speaking, the majority of them are not reoffending.
Well, your brother, now he'll have cost the taxpayer what? 700,000 or something to keep him locked up. He could have been assessed in court. For me, there should be somebody in court, people like your brother, history of mental health, deal with it there and then. You know, a court order or something like that, a trip to a psychiatric, and you've already said that we need to change the facilities. For me, build more rental hospital, forensic units, put more into that than building more prisons.
Absolutely. Well, and again as well, that's a win-win situation for the public, because if you build the mental health rehabilitation units for initially dealing with all the psychologically messed up prisoners because of the way the system doesn't work, when you clear those prisoners through the mental health system and they're able and well enough to get back into the community, you will then have facilities to deal with the ever-growing population that are not in prison and don't have a criminal conviction but do have mental health problems. The facilities will be there for those people to use as well. It's a win-win situation in the longer term. Difficult for the ministers and the health service and everything to perhaps get into place and get it up and running, but is that not what we elect our governments and that to do these difficult things?
Well, we
take
do
these difficult decisions and come up with the solutions.
The thing about the prison service, it's very much like the NHS, in that, you know, everyone talks about budget and being underfunded, the amount of money that's wasted on jobs that they don't need and other things. The prison service is exactly the same. The actual prison service budget, a big percentage of that will go to private companies working within the prison, delivering services for the prison that the prison system used to run themselves. Strangeways, at one bit, yeah, it was classed as a private business, even though it was a public sector prison. Everyone within them walls, they employed everybody. They employed the maintenance department. They worked for Strangeways. Everyone worked for Strangeways. Yeah, and then bits get put out to other people. The maintenance department, I've talked about that before. the maintenance department works for somebody like GeoAmy now, somebody like that, Serco, whoever it is, yeah. And every single job that one of them maintenance guys who was employed by the prison, still doing the same job, yeah, as a cost, and a big cost. Come and drill a couple of holes in your wall and put a board up or something like that, 400 quid, you know, 10 minutes work, and that's what it's like. So Strangeways budget, a big percentage of that budget for that prison goes to the maintenance department, which is a private sector company that is making massive amounts of money.
Yeah.
So let's get back to Laddo. He's done his first 3 years.
Yeah.
He tried to comply, or complied as much.
Well, he did. He engaged very constructively. He got himself clean of alcohol and drugs, engaged with chaplaincy. He got physically fit and remains physically fit, not mentally fit, but physically
can I ask
fit.
you,
I have to express that.
Was that a conscientious decision on his part? Right, alcohol, they have no choice. Alcoholics are some of the most needy people that come into prison, and you see the biggest change, they go out healthy, because obviously, you know, they detox people and they get well, they eat. However, the drugs, is that a conscious decision on his part? Because obviously there's drugs in every prison, on every link.
Well, it must have been a conscious decision, because he was trying to get help for his alcoholism before he got arrested. And how sad is it that when he first went into prison, he turned around and said that he felt that he was in the right place so that he could get the help that he needed. And in those first, in the years of his tariff, he did get the help that he needed because he got himself clean. I think he'd given up the smoking, certainly the LSD, and he may have been only smoking a little bit of recreational cannabis
On the out?
at the time.
Yeah.
At the time that after his marriage had broken up, he'd certainly not gone back to LSD insofar as I'm aware, but may have taken cannabis occasionally. But his alcoholism was, he couldn't stop drinking. He'd have a drink and then he just couldn't stop. He'd just drink himself into oblivion. So once he was in prison, he stopped. I'm sure that must have been a struggle for him. If you're alcohol dependent, if you just stop, you can die.
It is the most successful detox in prison, alcohol. Obviously it's not readily available, they can brew the stuff, but like I said, the lads that my own cousin, in his last 15 years on the planet, the only time he was fit and healthy and free from alcohol was when he come out of Doncaster prison. He got a short sentence, he come out, he looked really well. That was the chance really when you need to get older people.
Yeah.
You know.
Rob did that. He did it was called WRAPT. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's to do with alcohol dependency, and it's I think they're a charity, an outside charity that come into the prisons and help prisoners who have got alcohol problems clear themselves up. And you got a glowing report from it's a 12-step program or something, I think it's called. Yeah, and he completed the 12-step program, and he still tries as best as he can to engage with Alcoholics Anonymous, but with the way that the prisons have got the prisoners locked down, it's difficult for him to continue engaging, not through any fault of his own, but just because of the shortage of staff and that they can't get out to...
Yeah, they won't be unlocking prisoners in an evening when people come in to do group sessions. They haven't got enough staff to do that. Can I ask you, so his first 3 years, pretty successful, quite fit, drug and alcohol free. On his first parole, do you know why he got knocked back?
So, yeah, I've had a basic understanding of why he got knocked back. So he had his OVP scores were too low for him.
What's that stand for?
I think it stands for Offender Violence Predictor scores.
Okay.
So they were too low for him to qualify for the prison services rehabilitation courses. However, he wanted to be seen to engage with what the prison were trying to force upon him by way of rehabilitation. So he engaged in what was then called the Healthy Relationships Program, which has since been abolished because it was proven not to work. He went on to the Healthy Relationships Program, which he didn't qualify to do because of his OVP scores.
So basically, he's been risk assessed and he's low risk.
Yeah.
So he shouldn't have been put forward for any courses.
That's right. That's my understanding of it.
And mine too.
So he started the Healthy Relationships Program with others. It's a group thing, and he was required to do a autobiography of his life, which he found too difficult to do because of the childhood experiences, bad, negative childhood experiences that he'd had. He didn't want to drag those up. They were too painful for him, and he couldn't get the support that he needed to tackle that particular issue. And so the people...
Can I just say, just play devil's advocate there. A lot of people, right, come away from prison, if they were going to tackle issues like that from the childhood, that would usually be through a therapist or something, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be, asking someone to go into their past childhood and write about it can be traumatic in itself, can't it?
Of course.
To ask somebody to do that, you can open a whole can of worms, but there's nothing in place to help them deal with that, is there?
Yeah, no, you need proper, appropriate professionals to deal with those kinds of issues. People who are properly trained to deal with those issues that have caused some kind of psychological,
trauma,
mental health
PTSD,
impairment, trauma, without a doubt.
PTSD.
Yeah. So the people that were facilitating the Healthy Relationships Program decided that he was being disruptive, so they removed him from the Healthy Relationships Program. And when that happened, that's when Rob just thought, I'm never ever going to get out of prison, I'm going to die in prison. And that's where he started to become a recluse and wouldn't leave his cell, and just went into this desperate, awful, disengaged, catatonic state, if you like. Not quite catatonic, but yeah, he was bad. He was ill.
Excuse me.
Because he wasn't getting the help that he needed to resolve his issues.
Did it getting removed from that course go against him? Was that seen as a negative thing?
Yeah, of course that would have been seen as a negative, yeah, because that would have been used to say that he wasn't willing to engage.
See, I see it as a positive. It's a course he's not qualified to do. He's low risk. He's gone on the course, he's shown willing to engage. That should have been seen as a positive for me, not the fact that he didn't complete it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're very good at turning.
Yeah.
They always look at the negative side of things and not the positive side of things.
That's exactly how the report was written up for him being withdrawn from the course. It was written up as a negative.
Yeah.
So when he eventually went for his first parole hearing, that was read as a negative. So he was never on what they call released on paper. He was never released on paper for his first ever parole hearing.
And how long was he not back for then?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. He's had knockback after knockback because he's never been released. So he's had various parole hearings at various points of time during his unlawful incarceration. So his first parole, he was in this awful, disengaged state. And they just wrote that he wasn't fit to be released. So
on the grounds that
on the grounds that he wasn't engaging with the prison service and the rehabilitation programs.
None that he qualified for.
Which he didn't qualify for
because he was
anyway.
low risk.
Yeah, because he was a low risk. Because he, as he will claim, he was wrongfully convicted, and his conviction was unsafe. He admits that he committed an act of wrongdoing.
Yep.
He's accepted responsibility for committing that act of wrongdoing. However, because of his OVP scores, he can't go on any of the rehabilitation, or he's now refusing as well to go on any of the rehabilitation programs because he doesn't qualify for them, because his OVP scores are too low, because he's wrongfully convicted and that his conviction is unsafe. So he's stuck in this is one of the many vicious circles that he's stuck in, that IPPs are stuck in, consistently stuck in. They will go round and round and round.
I will tell you now.
Circles.
I will tell you now. With that mindset, I completely understand his mindset, yeah. I've met other lads with that mindset, and when something happens and these lads and lasses get released, yeah, being positive, you know, they need to deal with these things. But if it stayed as it were now, with that mindset, I doubt very much he'll ever get released. You know that, don't you?
Yeah.
He probably knows that. I've seen people who they become numb, and it's okay, you know. They either just get on with it, go quiet into themselves, or they become disruptive. Yeah, one way or the other. Very quiet prisoners within themselves, they give up hope, and there's a chance that they're going to kill themselves, or they become problematic to the prison service. They become disruptive.
Yeah.
You know, they become the segregation type prisoners, violent and the like, you know, almost like protesting.
So he's not got at that stage yet, at this point where we are, where we're talking about it at the moment. He's at this stage where he's gone quiet and he's withdrawn into himself.
Do you have any contact with him?
So what this is where I have a lot of praise for HMP Bullingdon Safer Custody at that time, because they contacted me, and at this point I've not been to see my brother.
This is around about 2012.
Yeah.
So he's just gone over his tariff now.
Just gone over tariff, and he's in this bad state. And the Safer Custody team at HMP Bullingdon contacted me out of the blue and said that they were really worried and concerned for the state that my brother had gotten into. So on the back of that, I thought I'd better make an arrangement to go and visit him. And this was my first ever time into a prison, which was, for me, and I'm sure it is for perhaps most, if not everybody, the first time that they go to a prison to visit somebody. It's quite an overwhelming experience. So after getting through all of that, I got into the visits hall, and there was a prison officer on the desk in the visits hall. Said, "Oh, if you can see the person that you've come to see, you can make your way across to their desk." So I sort of looked around the visits hall, and I couldn't see my brother. So I said to the prison officer, after a couple of people had gone ahead past me to their visits, I said, I can't see him. I said, I can't see who I've come to see. So they asked me his name, so I said the name, I said the table number, and when I looked across at the table number, I thought, Christ, that's not my brother. I just didn't recognise him. And on approach to the table, he looked like Jesus, in the way Jesus is depicted in the Bible when Jesus is nailed to the cross, only even a lot worse. His hair was all greasy and matted and long and unkempt. His beard was just full of bits like bits of I don't know, dust, or bits of straw, you could almost say. There was just horrible bits in his beard, and he looked like he was just unkempt, and he was agitated, and he couldn't give me direct eye contact. He kept looking around the room, and he was on edge. He was tense, and I couldn't have a coherent conversation with him. I asked him if he wanted something from the canteen, and he didn't really say yes or no. I found the whole experience really upsetting and distressful. So I sat through that visit nearly for the I think it was 2 hours, and when the visit came to end and I got back out to my car, I just broke down. I broke down because I didn't recognise my own brother. I'd gone into that prison to see my brother, and how can you not recognise your own brother? So yeah, so I broke down, and then we went through a process with safer custody at HMP Bullingdon. At that time, very good. He was transferred to HMP Earlstoke, and I was engaged with safer custody at HMP Earlstoke, who were very good. And then he was then they couldn't do anything with him at HMP Earlstoke, so he was transferred to HMP Bristol, and safer custody there got in touch with a mental health hospital, and the mental health hospital went to Bristol to see him in the mental health unit at HMP Bristol, and he was transferred to hospital under section 47 to 49 of the Mental Health Act.
Was he moved quite quickly?
From
Bristol.
Yeah, it seemed to go quite quick. It's difficult to remember the period of time, but it seemed to happen quite quick, where he was bounced out of Bullingdon to Earlstoke, and then almost, I think you're talking 1 or 2 days from Earlstoke to Bristol, and maybe 1 or 2 days again before the people came from the hospital to assess him.
Can I just? This is about 2013, isn't it?
About what?
It's about 2013.
Yeah. So this. We're probably now six months after maybe 6 or even 12 months after his tariff has expired.
See,
maybe even a little bit longer. It's difficult to remember.
Do you know what? That is really good. That the fact that one prison recognised they couldn't do anything, and he was only there a couple of days before they moved him to Bristol, and then he was assessed so quickly, and then moved to hospital.
They were good. They were definitely good at that time.
Yeah, credit where credit's due.
Yeah, absolutely. All 3 safer custody teams at those 3 institutions at that time were fantastic. So, thank you to those, if any of them are watching this. Thank you to those people that were involved in that. And there needs to be more people like that in the prison service.
Hospital, how did that turn out?
So he's gone into hospital.
Low secure?
Low secure mental health unit. It made visiting so much easier. I could just phone them up, and if no one else was visiting their relatives that were in the low secure unit, then I went.
How were you treated at the hospital? Was it?
They were great.
A different experience to going to prison?
I found that when I went on the prison visits, I was treated with respect by the staff at prison.
Yep.
And I was treated with the same respect at the secure hospital as well. So I have no complaints at this stage with hospital staff, excuse me, or prison staff. So he was in such a bad way that they sort of had to allow him to sort of settle in, I guess, for a few days, and then he was in that bad a physical state that he had to go to at least 2 separate hospitals to have 2 separate operations. One was on his dental or oral. They had an oral operation, not quite entirely sure what it was. And the other one was for, he'd been self-neglecting that much that he had, I think it was an ingrowing toenail that had grown so far up into his leg that it had just got to a point where it was starting to get gangrenous. So to have an operation to remove the ingrowing toenail, and it was touch and go as to whether they'd have to remove his whole lower leg.
Ooh.
Fortunately they were able to not have to amputate, so he's still got his leg. And so after those operations, it was a slow process where he slowly started to mentally function.
Did he resist, or did he go along with it?
Well, he was like a zombie. So he wasn't resisting. He
got him on medication pretty quickly.
I don't know. He wasn't taking medication as such. What they were having to do, I think they had to feed him. He had to be fed like yogurts that had lots of all these different nutrients added, so that he could put on weight.
Yeah.
So that he could gain weight, and then eventually started to gain weight. As he was gaining weight, and he was getting all the nutrients back into his body, and that he was recovering from the I'm not sure whether he must have been at a specific mental point to be able to go for the operation. So there was a lot going on, and I can't really deconstruct exactly what happened in what order, but he got physically better, then he started to get mentally better, then he started engaging with all the gym stuff that was there, and started to get physically fit. As he was getting more and more physically fit, he was cooking for himself in their kitchens. So he was developing all of these basic skills that we take for granted, that we use every single day.
Of course.
So he's getting back in control of himself and being able to look after himself. He'd shave. He was shaving now, and he was showering, and just doing all those basic things that we do every day, that we take for granted when we're of the right mind. So then they started to look at what is actually wrong. What is his mental health impairment? What is wrong? Where is his impairment? Where is it lying? And to do that, they needed to assess him. So he was waiting for the right members of staff to become available to do his assessment. But whilst he was waiting for his assessment, he was suddenly returned to prison. So he never got the assessment that he needed to be diagnosed and to get the treatment that he needed, which, when we were speaking earlier, I forgot to mention that at that time there was a diagnosis of PTSD. Rob has initially had a diagnosis of PTSD not long after he was arrested, but at that time, the type of mental health impairment that he probably has, although we don't know whether he's got it because he's not been assessed for it, so he's not been diagnosed for it, they could not diagnose in this country until June 2018. So what they did was they diagnosed him with what's called an adjustment disorder. And an adjustment disorder, they'll give that diagnosis to someone when they're not quite sure really what's actually wrong with someone's mental health impairment. So there is also now a diagnosis which they can use now in this country, which happened after June 2018, where they can diagnose a thing called complex PTSD. It's likely that he's got complex PTSD because he has already been diagnosed with PTSD because of his childhood issues and of the trauma that he's experienced whilst he's been in prison on this IPP sentence.
No doubt.
So as a direct result of the IPP sentence, he has probably got his PTSD, because it's untreated, has certainly got worse, and he has probably got complex PTSD, but we don't know because he needs to go back to hospital to be assessed, which he never got the assessment in the first place, and he wouldn't have got the diagnosis at that time anyway, because that diagnosis wasn't available in this country at that time. So if he were to go back to hospital now, which is perhaps what should happen, he should go back to hospital, be assessed, be diagnosed, and there is treatment for PTSD. You do not need tablets and medication to treat PTSD. It can be done through eye movement desensitization reprocessing and talking therapy. What do they call it? Cognitive behavioral therapy. They're the two main. There are other treatments, but they're the two main ones now that work for treating PTSD. PTSD gets rid of all of those nightmares and everything that you might be having, and it allows you to learn with the trauma that you live with the trauma that you've experienced.
And it would also help him
not
get him in a better
treatment.
frame of mind in order to get out of prison.
Yes, yeah.
Can I just say, I saw plenty of people over 7 years go from the prison healthcare to low secure, medium secure, high secure hospitals. Yeah. The reason they go there is for an assessment. They go, they're assessed, you know, diagnosed, medicated or whatever, and then they come back into prison.
But Rob wasn't assessed.
No, but the whole point of going
Is to get
to these
assessed.
units is to get assessed.
Yeah.
Or if people, obviously, some people already had a diagnosis. If people stop taking the meds, they will also go to forensic units, yeah. But somebody who hasn't had an assessment, hasn't got a diagnosis, that's the whole point of going to hospital. So the fact that he was sent back without being assessed seems...
Well, yeah, for that's yeah. You go to hospital.
It makes you wonder who did that.
Even from physical injuries, don't you? You go to hospital to get assessed to find out what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Once you've been assessed with what's wrong with you, then they can treat you.
Yeah.
But if you haven't been assessed with what's wrong with you,
Yeah.
then you can't be treated.
The problem on that front is places. There's not enough places in forensic units. There is a waiting list that can be from prison, the community, or elsewhere, and they will have administrative staff, and I know this from what my friend says because he spent 40 years in mental health. People from prisons will be moved to make spaces for other people because they're not seen as a priority.
Yeah.
That does happen.
IPPs are pushed down the priority list because on their documentation, as what I've been led to believe, it says 99 years. So the prison officers see that 99 years and they just think, phew, that's a life sentence prisoner. You can go to the bottom of the pile.
I told yourself, that's all it says, 99 years. Not a lot of understanding. Roddy, is that a good place to stop, do you think?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
So, back in prison, it gets quite complicated after that, does it not?
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll discuss a lot of things from your perspective. I'll give my take as an ex-officer how it works, and hopefully people have a better understanding, yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
I appreciate your time, mate.
Likewise, thank you for your time.
I'll see you.